Right, councillors. I would be looking for a motion to reconvene our special council meeting at 8:28 p.m. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. So just a quick recap. We are on item 7.2.1.4. However, out of that, we have tabled the discussion on the replacement of both the fire station and of the aerial until January 24th, pending, February. I'm just changing the dates around. February 24th, thank you, pending legal advice. However, we do still have the replacement pump 621 at Station 2 to discuss, which I will open up for comments and questions now. Councillor Dunstall.
Through you, Mayor. What year is that again? The truck, or the pumper? The age, sorry. You don't know that off the top of your head? Chief Leeson.
15 years.
15. And what is the... Oh, it's more than 15?
We will just give Chief a moment to get to the correct paper there.
Take your time. That's what I do.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Dunstall, it is 2008, so it's now 17 years old.
And the insurance piece for the trucks, are they all the same? I know that there's a 25-year mark where at that point you can no longer get the vehicle insured. Are they all at the 25-year mark?
Through the chair, that's not entirely how the system works, so let me explain. There are levels within the grading that FUS uses that starts with what they call small communities, small rural communities, then they go to medium size, then they go to cities, large cities like Kitchener, Waterloo, etc. Wilmot has always used the medium size because our hazard index falls under the medium as well, which means that our frontline pumper was replaced in 15 years, and then we went one step further. Every 5 years we replaced a pumper because we have to have 3, one for each station. And then when the first purchased pumper reaches 15 years of age, we would move it into second line duty. And it would reside at Station 1 then for the additional 5 years of 20. Then once it hits 20 years of age, it can no longer be used for that purpose. So then we move it into New Dundee, and then we just, it's kind of like shark's teeth, we just keep moving them ahead every 5 years so that we're always ultimately getting a full 25 years out of every pumper that we've ever purchased. And that's basically how the system goes. Now, to be fully transparent, the maximum that we can keep a frontline duty vehicle using the small rule, which is a population of under 30,000, which we are, is 20 years. So you, Council, I wouldn't recommend you do this. I think we have a good system in place, and our apparatus maintenance costs are decent for our fleet. We have a fairly large fleet for our small municipality, and we're doing well with that. But Council could move it to 20 years, so we could move that yardstick to 20 years for every frontline apparatus, and then still maintaining one in the second line, which would then mean our last apparatus out the door would be 30 years old, and it would be in reserve after 25 as well.
Can I ask you why we haven't done that? If you said that we could move it to the, why wouldn't we?
Why wouldn't we?
Wow.
I can't answer that question. When I came here originally, that was the way it was done. It was always understood that way. It was in the fire master plan that way, and I just have never, this discussion never occurred. I'll be quite honest. It's in my tenure as a fire chief, when a new council comes on board, I am given an opportunity to have a discussion about all of these documents that I've presented to you and explain and interpret, and that gives council an opportunity to sort of digest and determine what direction they want to go. The E&R bylaw is your bylaw. You determine the levels of service, and I make that very clear during those educational sessions that that's your opportunity to discuss these things. So it's completely on council to decide that. Again, I would request that if you're planning on doing that, let's add that to the discussion with legal advice to make sure that you clearly understand any consequences, because as soon as you do these things, you increase some of your risk.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Then I would ask that we include that, because why not? If we could get an extra 5 years and put it off and save some money, please.
Councillor Wilkinson. Okay.
I just wanted to close that even if we move, if council chooses to move the bar to 20 years, it takes 2 years to get this pumper, we would still have to order it because it's already at 17 years of age. We've got a year to play with, but we would have to get it ordered because it does take 2 years to get them, and we wouldn't have it in 20 years.
Okay. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, while we're on the topic, in terms of, I guess, deferring everything to legal, maybe another question that would be pertinent would be reviewing the document that you provided, specifically the fire underwriter service, and when they sort of talk about the schedule. I understand what you're saying, first line, second line, and then reserve. Some of the things that are maybe missing from this that would provide additional context would be when you talk about getting insurance and through the fire underwriter service, like what is the cost? What is the risk? What is everything associated with it? I mean, all I keep hearing is that it's, oh, you just can't get insurance. But the thing is what is the actual cost to us? And that would be of great benefit, because then we can actually weigh which way we should lean on this, or potentially have a more informed decision to say, okay, well, you know what, that risk to the community or that increased cost to the community from the fire underwriter service or the insurance is going to outweigh obviously what the cost of a new pumper is, or et cetera. Right? We don't know that relationship yet. So that information would be incredibly useful. And obviously the legal opinion on that as well, I think, would be incredibly useful. Does that make sense?
Chief Leeson.
Could I, through you, Chair, could I respond to that? I had a very, very lengthy discussion with fire underwriters last week after our meeting on Thursday. I spoke to them Friday. And when it comes to the dollars with insurance rates, they can't provide us anything. And then if you go to the insurance side, they can't provide anything either, because they don't know if fire underwriters were to downgrade us. For example, if they downgraded our commercial rating, we currently sit at 5 in our built-up areas. I want to explore, can we improve that with our current level of service? Can we improve that? Can FUS come back in and do a rating on that and say, and then we can pass that on to our tax base with what we have now?
Councillor Wilkinson.
So through the chair, I can appreciate what you're saying. The information is up to her, but I think for the benefit of all is help us understand that in terms of the real terms, and maybe not tonight, but when you're saying a rating of 5, we don't know how that's applied, right? And to provide that context would be extremely beneficial.
So I think just for sake of the conversation, can that be direction to come back for further information on the 24th? Chief Leeson. Through
the chair, I don't want to disappoint council in anything I come back with. What I can assure you is it will not be a dollar amount. They will not give me anything. But I can explain the gradings to you and how that means in our township. I can explain that.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, through the chair, I understand very clearly you can't provide a dollar amount, but providing the context and the relationship as to how it will affect different areas, whether that's the consumer directly who's buying insurance for their home, whether that's what we're paying on our trucks, whether that's what the township's paying. I mean, that information is useful, because then again, we can go back and weigh that risk analysis for ourselves.
Okay. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I don't know if I'm having the mystery disappearing information. I think I had read somewhere that the enclosed operator station on the pumper was the approach that you were taking, and I've heard from different firefighters at Roma that they've sourced or looked at open stations versus enclosed stations, and they feel actually some operators prefer an open station because it puts them in visual contact with which hose is being pumped, etc., and they find that the enclosed ones maybe be northern Ontario or a prairie type of thing where extreme cold. Any comment on that, and do you have an idea of what additional cost an enclosed operator station would bring as compared to an open station?
Through the chair, when the fire leadership team sat down and decided to look at how fire apparatus are designed, we went through all those discussions with the open, the closed, and the benefits, the disadvantages, et cetera, and we took an extra added step with with fire services now being recognized as a carcinogenic profession. When we have pump operators standing out in that environment, you know, when you're in the, you know, it's really windy tonight, you could be standing out there for 8 hours running a pump. Well, we'll cycle people, but it's very uncomfortable. Pouring rain, et cetera, and then if you happen to be in a fire zone where the smoke starts to drift your way, the cab gives you some area of refuge to be inside. As far as visibility goes, you have really good visibility in these trucks. There's lots of windows and access, and your controls tell you how to deal with things. So I don't buy that, but there's just so many safety advantages that we decided to go that direction, and it was a department decision. Could we go to an open cab again, or an open pump panel? If council wants to demand that we do that, we have no choice but to do that if that's council's direction.
No, I think that's an adequate response. Thank you.
Okay, so councillors, unless anyone correct me if I'm reading the room wrong, but we're going to push off the discussion of the replacement pump truck, seeking further legal advice, also coming back on the 24th of February. Councillor Creston?
Yes, I think you're reading the room right. I guess I have one further question about tendering for the tanker, is it, and the rescue vehicle that were approved last year. So is that going to proceed, or there is a potential that they could all be different manufacturers based on tender, correct? So bundling, you know, I'm just questioning about the advantages of bundling versus, you know, waiting and seeing cost. You've made the point throughout your documents that costs continue to escalate, and I'm just kind of wondering the pros and cons of what bundling brings to the table versus what, you know, inflation and additional cost brings.
Sure, through the chair, the bundling option was to be brought to council last year, and I was not permitted to do so. So it's been dragged on. We're here today, and that's okay. I just want to make it clear that depending on council's decision, it may change the scope of how I do the tendering process. I have tender documents ready to go, or RFP documents. I don't tender. RFP documents ready to go on both the rescue, well, sorry, on all apparatus. They're ready to go. I just need permission and direction from council as to what I'm permitted to purchase and what I'm not permitted to purchase, and then that will be the scope. I'm going to send it out as a bundle no matter what. The piecemealing may occur anyway because I'm obviously going to be looking to save the tax base as much money as I can through the process, and it has to come back to council for final approval anyway through that process.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Chief Leeson. We will reconvene the discussions on the fire items on the 24th. Moving on to 7.2.1.5, and this is in relation to the fleet and equipment replacement program in the 2025 capital budget. Do councillors have any additional questions? We are at a decision-making point of either including, removing, or amending the equipment replacement program before us. So anyone who wants to look at, I feel like I should start auctioneering these things off. Councillor Wilkinson I'm being asked to provide a moment. I will give you all a moment to catch up on your agendas as to where we are.
Through you, Mayor, could we have the cross-page reference on these items? Because
Yes, I think it'll just be one moment for somebody with a computer, which is not me.
I don't have the page, but I know where it is in the book. Yeah, request 29 for infrastructure.
Request 29 under infrastructure services, so it should be in your book under
The absolute last request in the capital package.
apparently the very last request in the capital package. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair. So I'll start the conversation. I'm inclined to make some modifications to this. For instance, the light-duty pickup truck, I think it is certainly a piece that's maybe it would be nice to have. It's luxurious. Perhaps we will have an old Dodge Ram van that could be used, but you know, I'm looking at the cost to potentially look at paying out mileage, and it's 10% of what's being proposed here. So I think, given that you could potentially see that number slightly lower, even slightly higher, it's still, in my opinion, a little more palatable there. So I would move to modify it and say no light duty truck, pay out mileage and wear and tear for personal vehicle use, and then I would be in favor of looking at the dump truck, given that it's substantial in cost and it's getting up in age. That's my thought to start the conversation.
Okay, so just to get something on the floor then, that's been moved by Councillor Wilkinson. Is there a seconder to that? Okay. Councillor Cressman, is that seconding or a question?
I'm just going to ask a question through you, Mayor, that the single axle, the fleet attachment, does that go on the dump truck?
Through you, Mayor, no, that would be for the plow, for the single axle unit.
For the plow on the dump truck?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so the dump truck doesn't fulfill its duty unless it's got a plow on it for winter. So I guess that's where I was looking at it, thinking that the 40,000 for the blade, etc., would make a whole lot of sense to be added to the dump truck we'd be buying.
Director Mollenhuis, would you like to comment on that?
Through you, Mayor, yes, the fleet attachments and the single axle dump would come together. Yes, they are listed there just for your reference, so.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, is that going to make you change what you were suggesting?
No, through the chair, I'm inclined to agree. I think my motion really was just to approve as is, but strike the light duty pickup truck.
Okay, very good. So is there a seconder then for that? Seconded by Councillor Cressman. So that is now on the floor. What additional questions or comments about what's before us? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. And, okay, now on to the item 7.2.2, which is the 10-year capital budget plan. Again, this is non-funded, and I know that we have motions outstanding that we're about to return to, but were there any questions that councillors had on this item and the information provided? I'm not seeing any at this time, and like I said, I think potentially what we wind up doing with these motions before us, it may impact this anyways. So I will now ask everybody, Councillor Martin.
Sorry, I was going to ask if I could bring up a different topic on the capital budget, but I didn't want to say anything on the 10-year capital budget.
Okay, yes, so the motion that you want to introduce, we're going to do at the end of all of the other motions that we have on the table would be the appropriate time to bring that forward. So for right now, we are going to go back to item, let me make sure here, 8.2. And this is back to Councillor Dunstall's notice of motion regarding long-term funding strategy. Just to recap, we had left off wanting to further discuss all of the capital items. I think people were really looking about what was going to happen with fire. Obviously, that's been moved to the 24th. So now we are back, I would say, at a decision point, kind of focusing on if we are looking at a 9% increase or possibly higher or lower, and if over the 4-year implementation is what we're looking at. And obviously, of course, the other option still remains that you can choose to defeat the motion. And again, keeping in mind that we have another motion in 2 motions coming up that is going to be impacted potentially by this if it passes with a percentage attached to it. So with that lovely recap of where we are at, would anybody like to revisit the discussion of it's still sitting at 9% over 4 years at this time? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Acting CAO Clark, does this advance our planning ahead of our next meeting?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Yes, so if council were to approve a percentage over a period of time, that gives us some capability to have a little bit more foresight when we come back at the 24th with a capital plan based on that funding envelope. So it does give us a bit of extra information that gives us a more informed presentation at the 24th. So it is definitely helpful for staff.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, do I understand it correctly that with the current decisions we've made, we're still sitting at around 27%? Is that the percentage we're talking about?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Specifically for the capital, with the stuff that the council's directed staff to move out to a future year, it's roughly, instead of the 36% increase for capital, we need about a 27% increase for capital.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. CAO Clark, does that mean that if the 9% passed, that you would have a third of those capital projects moving forward? If it was at 27, then would that be a third, roughly?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Not really. There's not a linear relationship between the projects that are put forward and the funding envelope because, for example, one of engineering's significant projects is predominantly water, wastewater, and storm and development charges, so it has a very small impact on the tax funded versus a lot of community services or fire are reliant on tax funding. So it's going to change depending on which projects. Yeah, so it's not as simple as saying only a third of the projects would come forward.
Councillor Stu?
Just for clarification, so if we were to move forward with, let's say, a 9% increase year over 4, 5, 6, whatever years, if we come over a year that there is a dire situation and obviously needs and wants, but there can be other capital requests above that 9% year over year, like if there is something that we need to address immediately, imminently with the infrastructure services potentially?
So through you, Madam Mayor, yes. Annually, we would obviously prioritize that current year's asks. And if for some reason we had a similar situation where there was a need beyond the funding envelope, we would identify that to council as a special exception or a different funding methodology that might be required. And so from a year-to-year basis, it definitely would potentially go over that number. One of the things I would try to do, though, or as we try to do, is that if we have more cost certainty in the funding envelope, then it allows us to develop that 10-year plan and take out some of that variability.
So any other questions, comments, or amendments? Councillor Stu.
Just speaking out loud, so if we are going to tie, like it is a 10-year plan, I would be more in favor of amortizing it over 6 to 7 years at a potential lower year-over-year hit. That's just my thoughts. I don't know what the appetite is amongst council.
I guess my commentary when I look at that, it's this year's current capital that the ask is in the draft budget, 36%. So we're spreading out that ask. That's not including the fact that that is included in the base budget now going forward, in theory, if approved as is, plus then additional items that were assumed to be included. So right now what is proposed is taking this year's ask and stretching it out over 4 years, but that's not including what technically would be considered for next year and the year after and the year after that. So I guess my only concern about spreading it this year's ask over more than 4 years is how much more kicking down the road can we do of the can. I'm not thrilled with the number, but also I'm sitting at the point of recognizing we do need to make some significant movement in terms of funding our capital programming. That's where I'm stuck. What I will say, though, is I do think we can have this at 9% over the 4 years. Obviously, each budget time, we still have the ability to alter and get further impact from staff and suggestions, recommendations. But I think then in the further upcoming motion of the 5 to 7 year financial strategy, that can further elaborate on how we continue to get further out of this hole. I don't necessarily see them being separate. I just think this is one way to deal with spreading out this year's ask over 4 years and then look at a better financial picture and plan for the next 5 to 7. Is kind of where I'm sitting at, thinking out loud.
Eating the elephant.
Yeah, eating it one bite at a time. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I echo some of your thoughts there and certainly agree this is the situation we're in, and unfortunately it's not easy. I mean, the easy button is literally just put forward what was proposed, but I think the other side, in looking at it, I mean, I appreciate a lot what Councillor Dunstall is trying to do in providing at least a path forward and direction. My concern is, and my hesitation at this point, is not knowing where our final operating budget number is. And in the two of them combined, we could still be looking at a pretty substantial ask here of the tax base. So while I'm inclined to look at this and say, yes, this is going to provide direction forward, my concern is that, you know, I think we still need to be open to potentially revisiting it. Whether that's up or down, I don't know. There's just still a lot of information to take in and discuss. So that's my thought. It's a lot.
I would just add in the caveat to that, Councillor Wilkinson, definitely hear what you're saying. If this goes forward tonight, that gives staff more direction on what to bring back to us on the 24th, at which point we still haven't passed the final budget. So we're still in control of altering if we go, that really doesn't work, or oh, you know what, there's more wiggle room, would be the one thing. I think we're just starting to reach a bit of a stalemate of, yes, we appreciate these are all hard decisions, but I think to be able to work with staff and effectively get where I think we're all trying to aim towards for the benefit of the residents, giving some direction. So on the 24th, there's a bit more concrete movement, but that's just my commentary on that. Councillor Dunstall, did you have your hand up? Or okay, so Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, I realize that it's difficult talking about increases, and it can bring out a lot of strong emotion. I appreciate Councillor Dunstall putting forward these numbers and giving us some specifics in terms of what it might mean on a $5,000 to $6,000 tax bill. I would be inclined to increase that number of 9% because I look at the 27% and I realize we can't just quantify it and say it's a third, but the 9% still is not getting close to half of what that 27% is. And so the kicking things down the road just doesn't seem like a good idea. So I don't know what's a good number to increase it to, but even if we went like 11 or 12%, that would be more my inclination.
So are you proposing an amendment then, Councillor Martin?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm just trying to, I guess, get a feel for the room using some of your words from earlier. I know that my colleagues are proposing something less. If, in fact, some people are saying less and some people are saying more, maybe then 9% is the number we come up with. But I'm saying out loud what I'm thinking about.
Councillor Sadhu?
Just a thought to kind of help break this stalemate here. We can still approve this and see what we come back with for the final budget. And then we can make that decision of, okay, this is what we have in front of us. Do we want to start biting off more or do we want to scale back? But this, like you said, it's going to give staff direction kind of on what to move forward with so we have some concrete numbers for the next meeting. And we also know that we're not married to this and we can always choose to go up or down. But I think this is a good start to start formulating a plan, and then we can revisit that at the next meeting going forward from there.
So any other comments, maybe answering Councillor Martin's question that he's thrown out, or Councillor Dunstall?
I've been running the numbers. So at 10%, and I always use the 6,000 mark. So at 10%, it's $174 for the year versus $156.60 for the 9%. So we go from $1,305 per month if you're looking at 9% to $1,450 per month if you're looking for at 10%. So that's $1.45 more a month for that extra percentage. Just putting it out there.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, just to clarify, Councillor Dunstall, that's just related to capital funding, right? That wouldn't include...
That's the 9% and then
right,
the 10%.
So that
yep.
wouldn't include the
exactly.
draft
the operating budget. Nope.
And that obviously doesn't include the region and education portion.
Correct.
Right? We're just talking, yeah, okay.
Correct.
Okay. Councillor Cressman?
I think there comes a time where you have to make a decision, and so I'm going to call the question.
Great. So I'm procedurally not going to go through that, and I'm just going to ask for the question to be called, or I'm going to call it. But yes, we're going to skip through the making an actual motion through our procedural bylaw to call the question. So all those in favor of the motion as it stands, and that carries unanimously. Moving on to Councillor Wilkinson's notice of motion on departmental operating budget reductions. Councillor Wilkinson, I will turn it over to you to introduce this.
Thank you. Through the chair, please no one get mad at me, but what I'm looking at here is there was the variance analysis that came forward. I really am looking for a little bit more information. I think ultimately, you know, the exercise that I think a few of us have asked for and not received yet is what are we doing to focus on cost reduction within departments? This is an ask. There is time, but I'd be looking at everyone to come back and propose a 5% reduction or find savings in your department, and whatever, by whatever means necessary is essentially what I'm getting at here, without reading into the detail. And we're not obviously talking about tax supported or non-tax supported operating budgets like water and wastewater and building and cemetery, but rather your actual costs to operate the township. So asking for a 5% reduction target, and if unable to achieve that, provide reasoning and methodology as to why. But I think it's achievable, and it's a big ask, but it's one that will hopefully bring down costs or identify areas of opportunity for us and ultimately reduce that operating budget significantly. So that's where I'm coming from with this.
Councillor Dunstall, is that seconding or a question? Okay, do we have a seconder first? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu, and we'll go to Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. This is to CAO Clerk. So knowing the operational budget the way that you do, a 5% increase, would that entail cutting service? I'm assuming that would entail cutting services, which would then entail perhaps cutting staff. Is that correct?
5% decrease.
Decrease, sorry, is that what I said? Decrease.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, without getting into specifics, a 5% reduction would entail service reduction and staffing reduction.
Thank you.
I guess the caveat I would just throw on that is this isn't saying, or my understanding of the motion is not saying that council will be going ahead with a 5% reduction. It's asking staff to bring back options. I'm kind of comparing this to regional budget. We had asked staff to come back in under 8%. They provided options of some that included staffing options that were addressed and closed, and council did not pursue many of the options that were presented, but they were at least options and now opportunities that we're further exploring in future budgets. So that's just kind of the angle I'm coming at this exercise. But Councillor Sadhu.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we did this exercise last year where we asked departments to come back at a 2.5%, and then they provided us options, and it's up to us if we want to proceed or not. I don't remember off the top of my head of how many we did, but I would be in favor of this, just as going through the exercise of bring back options, and then we can kind of sift through it and see if there is appetite on this side of the table to move forward with that.
I will take that as commentary, but is there other questions or comments at this time, councillors? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I think that, yeah, the point of clarity here is that it's looking for the information, right? And that's going to be related to programs and staff. And there might be other things that come back that we can identify as efficiencies. Not a fun exercise for sure, but again, this whole budget I certainly would not describe as fun.
Any other questions or comments on this, councillors? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. And on to Councillor Wilkins.
No, we can just stop there.
That's further ask. So Councillor Wilkinson's notice of motion regarding the development of a 5 to 7 year budget plan. So based off of the approval of Councillor Dunstall's motion, we have the 9%, which we would then enter into the blank areas to make sense. And I guess I'm just quickly making sure. So Councillor Wilkinson, I'll turn it over to you then to introduce your notice.
Through the chair, thank you. I mean, very similar to Councillor Dunstall's approach here. I think ultimately where we've agreed upon is that 9%. I'm actually looking at this and saying, potentially we can wait to hear that particular plan come back. If I'm not mistaken, we are waiting. That motion will bring back 9% over 4 years. So I think if we're willing to maybe plug those numbers in, you know, the additional pieces that obviously I'm asking for, perhaps staff can take that as direction, or we can just plug in those numbers and make those amendments to be 9% over 4 years and then ask for the additional pieces of information there. That's what I'd be willing to do at this point. So not necessarily a full 5 to 7 year.
Okay, so you're the one proposing it and it's not been seconded yet, so I think we can take your changes as suggested, so plugging in Councillor Dunstall's numbers of 9% over 4 years, and then really what would be new from what we didn't have in Councillor Dunstall's motion is the additional information that you've requested for the 2026 budget to be coming back. Is there a seconder for this motion then? I think everybody's currently reading / catching up on what I just described, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. As I said, a large majority of this motion, we've already made the decision because it was in the same spirit of Councillor Dunstall's. So really, we'd be looking at the additional information requests for 2026 and future budgets coming back. Any questions or comments on that? Councillor Dunstall.
This is for the 5 to 7 year, correct?
Yes, however, Councillor Wilkinson just said he's happy to remove the 5 to 7 year and go with your 4 year that your motion we just passed had.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments then? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. Councillor Wilkinson's notice of motion regarding the people plan and organizational structure review, I will turn it over to Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair. The reason I'm bringing this forward and the reason I brought it up is obviously I think it's the details here are related directly and indirectly to the budget, but I thought enough to include it in this particular meeting. It was referenced in one of the capital request sheets. To provide a little bit of background, I will say this much is the previous council had undertook the process and started the process to do a organizational structure review and people plan. An RFP was put out there, a consultant was selected, and our council term received a verbal update. I won't really dive into too much more detail than that. However, since that verbal update, we have not seen the specifics related to this plan. However, I am well aware of the fact that we have, as far as I'm concerned, cut the check and paid the bill on this. So the intention of this here is to get back information and set back on track the people plan. I think it is related to the budget, given that we have cut a check for it and it was referenced. Now, that reference may have been to a previous people plan. I did some research, I won't name any names, but let's just say I spoke to some folks who may have knowledge of it, and my understanding is that there is a potential previously approved people plan. So the instruction here really is to find what we're working off of and then go back and find the consultant who has our money and hopefully get our people plan completed. That's pretty much it.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Is there a seconder for this motion? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Councillor Dunstall, did you have a question there?
I did. I did want to ask CEO Clark about the people plan and what he knows about it. That's what I'm asking.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. So my understanding is that the first draft of the people plan was brought to council in closed in early 2023. I have council minutes from a closed session showing that it was, and that they saw it, and that after that it was supposed to be brought back to council at a future time, and that that is where things got dropped or not finished. Last summer, I know we started working on it, and then things went sideways, and we didn't get that back to council. So I know there is work outstanding on it, and I've talked to Lindsay, our HR manager, about that. And so I think we can definitely bring an update back.
Is there a time frame that you...
When Councillor Wilkinson's motion came forward, I think we agreed to provide an update in March, and then a final plan by September.
Any other comments or questions on this, councillors? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And Councillor Martin, I believe that you have a motion that you would like to bring forward.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Salonen. So in the capital budget decisions we made, and this was on January the 16th, we took out the $150,000 for the traffic calming. We had actually requested that infrastructure do some work on traffic calming in the summer. We had asked them to do the work. And so in talking with Director Molenhouse after January the 16th, I realized that by taking that money away, they don't actually have any money to focus on traffic calming. And then there was another part just after that. There was $40,000 requested for traffic study around Punky Doodle's Corner, and we took it from $40,000 to $20,000. And it's my understanding there was just an accident there this past week. And so if we've lessened the money, that might be an example of making it harder for them to do their work. So considering those two items, and I realize we can't re-vote on those two items since we've already voted on them, and considering that the request was originally for $150,000 on traffic calming and $40,000 for Punky Doodle's Corners, I'm proposing that we consider, I was thinking half, $75,000 on the traffic calming, and another $20,000, so make it a total of $95,000 for traffic calming and make that inclusive of the Punky Doodle's Corners work. So I'm wondering if that's a possibility. But I think Director Molenhouse would like to make a statement.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'd just like to clarify, it's not Punky Doodle Corner. We're actually looking at Huron Road with that. Yeah.
I apologize. I said Huron Road, and I mixed up the roads. I apologize. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make light of any accident and being confused about the roads. So, yeah, that's what I'm proposing, and I'm wondering, so I guess I would put forward a motion. I think technically, in order to consider it, I have to put the motion forward, right? So I would put forward that motion of $95,000.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Dunstall.
I wanted to ask a question. We're looking at the 9%, and the items that we removed from infrastructure, from Director Molenhouse's capital asks, are just going to be kicked down the road. They included the studies that you were discussing, and I know Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Sadhu, I think, had looked for some studies too for their constituents. So I'm just wondering, and I don't know if this is possible, if we can put the things that we removed from the infrastructure capital budget back in. It's going to be kicked down the road anyway. We've put in the 9% to try to deal with some of these things. I don't know if that's possible or not, but I just thought I'd put it out there just to complicate things for you.
I think I'm going to step in here in terms of giving sound direction to staff. I definitely hear what you're saying, Councillor. I think because we've gone through and made decisions at this point, we can leave it up to the professional discretion of our staff. And if perhaps there is an item that we have cut that they really feel is of great need or value to bring forward, then I think perhaps if there's consensus of council, we can give staff the direction that if they really feel a project we'd cut should come back for this year, that we should. Otherwise, I think we're just given a lot of moving target items, especially because the 9% I know is going to include more cuts than what we've already done as a council.
So when would we do that process of asking them?
So long as nobody is against what I just proposed, I believe staff can take that as direction. Is that fair? I'm mainly looking at Director Molenhouse because I think it mainly impacts your department.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Anybody really extremely opposed to letting staff decide? Okay. And of course, not fully decide, but what they're going to be proposing to bring back that council will have the final decision on for the 24th. Okay. So with that, we do, however, have Councillor Martin's motion of adding in $95,000 for traffic calming to this year's capital plan. So when staff are going through and making the 9%, that is an additional envelope, I guess, that they have available to them. Are there any other questions or comments on that particular item at this time? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor, and that carries unanimously. I am going to ask Councillor Cressman to chair one more time because I have one more motion to bring forward that has not previously been published. There is no number item. It's a new motion that I'd like to introduce.
Okay, as acting chair, I turn it over to the mayor to read her motion.
Thank you very much, Chair Cressman, through you. I wanted to put forward a motion to reduce the grant funding envelope this year, so for 2025, by $15,000. The reason I want to do that is because in December we had changed the criteria to qualify for the grant, and we have now excluded paying for salaried positions in our grant program. And the salary, there was a salaried position in particular that equated to $15,000 in that envelope of funding. And now that we just made a prior decision to look at further reducing that envelope of funding, I don't want to add a source of funding this year that's available to other groups that wasn't prior because it went to a role that we've now made antiquated to the system essentially. So I wanted to remove that $15,000 this year and going forward essentially. So, yes.
Seconder, Councillor Dunstall. Questions or comments? Are you ready to make? Okay. Everybody wants to get out of here. All those in favor of the motion? I declare that carried unanimously.
Thank you very much, Chair Cressman, today for stepping in. So the last major item that we need to do is essentially just defer the final operating budget motion to February 24th. May I have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Questions or comments? I'm not really seeing how there could be any. We can't make this decision now, but Councillor Martin.
I don't know if this is the right time to ask the question, but item 7.1.4, are we leaving that one for another meeting?
Yes, so okay. That one, because we have made changes that are reporting back on the operational, it's still deferred to at the very end of operational discussions. So that will be coming back on the 24th as well. Okay, so I will call the vote on deferring the main budget motion to February 24th. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And then that brings us to bylaws. There are two bylaws attached which do need to be considered this evening for a first, second, and third time, and finally pass an open council as they do go into effect as of February the 1st. So I'd look for a mover on that. Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? Sorry, was that a question, Councillor Cressman? Yes, you may ask your question.
So when it comes to 9.2 talks about fees for water and sanitary, and we have a report being, or I think I heard earlier this evening, that a report on fees was being generated. When can we expect that in the coming year? Or maybe I heard that wrong. Sorry.
I can answer that. Through the mayor to the councillor, I think you're referring to a water rate study, and I believe I have in my calendar on this Thursday to have an initial discussion with some of the people from water and wastewater about kicking off a rate study and doing that. So I can't give you a definitive time when it will be back, but I know we're starting the work, so we'll provide an update once we get into the work.
Just to follow up, so that would feed into this at some point in the future then?
Yeah, typically a rate study looks at the total cost because water and wastewater are mandated to be sustainable over the long term under the various legislation. And so the fee study or the rate study would look at what rates are required to achieve that. So we would bring that back to council at some point.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I will call the vote on the bylaws. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Confirmatory bylaw, may I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. An adjournment, moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That carries. Have a great night, everyone.